There's a moment in every life when something breaks. Quietly. Not a dramatic explosion, not a loud confrontation, but a subtle crack. So small that if you weren't paying attention, you might miss it entirely. It happens after years of being the reliable one, the helper, the strong friend, the one who always said yes, even when everything inside was screaming no. It happens after you've been stretched thin, invisible, overlooked, drained. And then, almost without warning, you reach a point where you whisper to yourself, "I can't keep doing this." You don't announce it. You don't post about it. You don't write a dramatic message. You simply begin doing something revolutionary. You stop being available. Carl Jung believed that the psyche has a way of pulling us toward wholeness, even against our will. He wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And this quiet withdrawal, this silent turn inward, is the earliest sign that your soul is trying to reclaim itself. This is the story of what happens when you stop giving yourself away. Stop showing up for people who don't show up for you. Stop abandoning your needs for the comfort of others. And finally, start choosing yourself again. There's a kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot cure. It's the exhaustion that comes from carrying more emotions than your body was built to hold. Most people who become over-available didn't choose it. They were shaped into it. Here's the harsh truth no one likes to admit. People who are always available learned the habit through survival. Maybe you grew up in a home where you had to stay alert. A parent's mood, a sibling's needs, a chaotic environment, emotional instability, a fear of disappointing someone, a pressure to be good or easy or responsible. You learned early that being helpful kept you safe. Being useful kept you liked. Being convenient kept you from being abandoned. Jung believed that childhood imprints shape our adult behaviors more than anything else. He said, "The most important problems of life are not to be solved, but outgrown." Your over-availability is one of those problems. To the outside world, it looks like kindness. It looks like generosity. It looks like strength. But inside, something very different is happening. Your boundaries erode, not because you don't have them, but because you learned to suppress them. Your identity blurs. You become whoever others need you to be. You become what is convenient for them. Your emotional energy drains. Humans weren't designed to carry everyone's burdens, yet you keep lifting them. You lose yourself quietly, piece by piece, promise by promise, yes by yes. And strangely, the more available you become, the more invisible you feel. It's one of the most painful contradictions of life. When you're always there for everyone, no one realizes you're hurting. People don't ask if you're okay. They assume you're fine because you've been fine for so long. We praise the resilient, but we rarely ask what it costs them. We admire the helpers, but we never ask who helps them. We depend on the strong ones, but we never wonder where their strength comes from, or what happens when it runs out. And one day, suddenly, it does run out. Not loudly, quietly, silently, almost imperceptibly, like a candle that flickers in an empty room, and then goes dark. That moment, the moment you stop being available, is the moment your life begins to change. But before healing comes something darker, something Jung understood deeply. The shadow. Jung's theory of the shadow is one of the most powerful ideas in psychology. The shadow is the part of you that holds everything you suppress: your anger, your exhaustion, your fear, your boundaries, your unmet needs, your unspoken truth, your unexpressed resentment, your hidden hurts. Every time you said, "It's okay," when it wasn't. No worries. when it was killing you. I can help. When you were drowning, your shadow collected it. It stored every moment you sacrificed yourself, every emotion you swallowed, every truth you buried to keep the peace. Eventually, the shadow becomes heavy, too heavy to ignore. You can pretend, you can smile, you can keep showing up, you can try to be everything to everyone. But the shadow keeps growing, and eventually it begins to whisper, "What about me?" This whisper is the beginning of withdrawal, not because you're tired, but because your deeper self is trying to emerge. Jung once wrote, "There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection." Your availability has become your imperfection. Your need to be there for everyone has become your prison. The shadow demands freedom. The signs your shadow is trying to break through. People often misunderstand withdrawal. They think it's laziness, or coldness, or losing interest. But shadow withdrawal is something else entirely. 1. You start feeling irritation toward people you used to tolerate. Not because they changed, but because you finally see what you were ignoring. 2. You begin craving silence more than conversations. Noise becomes painful. Expectations feel heavy. 3. People's emergencies no longer feel urgent to you. You start noticing that many of them aren't emergencies at all. 4. You feel resentment toward the people who take you for granted. Your shadow is pointing out where you've been betrayed, even by yourself. 5. You feel a strange emptiness around the people who used to drain you. That emptiness is clarity. It's the absence of illusion. 6. You begin saying less, not out of anger, but because you're finally listening to yourself. Your shadow is not the enemy. It is the part of you that wants to be whole. The identity split. Outside you versus inside you. When you're always available, you live two lives. The outer life, the helper, the reliable one, the strong one, the listener, the giver, the healer, the good person. The inner life, the tired soul, the quiet sadness, the unmet needs, the loneliness, the self-neglect, the unseen pain, the fading identity. It is impossible to maintain both forever, and so the psyche does something remarkable. It withdraws. Withdrawal is not failure. It is your inner self revolting against your outer performance. The moment the shadow takes over. The day you stop being available is not the day you become cold. It is the day your shadow finally gets a voice. It says, "Enough." Enough explaining. Enough tolerating. Enough pretending. Enough carrying emotional weight that isn't yours. It's the day you choose yourself, even if you don't say it out loud. Jung believed that withdrawal is not regression. It's integration, a pulling inward so that the psyche can rebuild. Think of a tree in winter. It looks dead from the outside, but underneath, it is storing energy, preparing for new growth. You look like you're pulling away, but inside, you are returning to your center. The psychological break that triggers withdrawal. Withdrawal often begins after one event, a breaking point. It could be small, a friend ignoring your message again, someone asking for help without checking on you, a sudden realization that you're the only one who shows up, a moment when someone disrespects your time, a comment that cuts deeper than expected, a request that feels like too much, or it could be big. Betrayal, emotional abandonment, burnout, a heartbreak, a personal crisis, losing someone important, reaching your absolute limit. Whatever the catalyst, the impact is the same. You stop being endlessly available, not in anger, not in revenge, not to punish others, but because your psyche refuses to keep betraying itself. The world misinterprets your withdrawal. People around you will react, some gently, some violently, some with confusion, some with silence. Some will call you distant. Some will say you've changed. Some will accuse you of being cold. Some will act like victims of your new boundaries. But here's the truth. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries will always be offended by your new ones. The world does not like when you stop being available, especially the people who took your availability for granted. But you are not responsible for their reactions. You're responsible for your healing. The shadow does not destroy, it rebuilds. Jung believed the shadow isn't darkness. It is the part of you waiting to become light. Your withdrawal is not the end of you. It is the beginning of a new form of you. A self that no longer abandons itself. A self that no longer gives away its energy freely. A self that knows its time is valuable. A self that protects its peace. A self that finally recognizes its worth. And from this place, everything changes. Your relationships, your boundaries, your inner world, your identity, your future. This is the beginning of the psychological transformation you've been avoiding. The transformation that will define the next chapter of your life. When you stop being endlessly available, the world around you shifts. People notice, and their reactions reveal everything they never said. Some react with confusion, some with gratitude, some with manipulation, some with silence, some with sudden interest, some with unexpected anger. But behind each reaction lies a psychological truth, one that Jung understood deeply. The way others react to your boundaries shows the role you played in their lives. Let's explore this in depth. Section 1. The 4 types of people who react to your withdrawal. 1. The entitled ones. Negative reaction. These are the people who benefited the most from your availability. They expected you to pick up on the first ring, to reply instantly, to drop everything when they needed you. Your availability wasn't kindness to them, it was convenience. So when you pull back, they panic. Not because they care, but because their access is threatened. Their reactions can include passive-aggressive comments, guilt-tripping, sudden complaints about how you've changed, attempts to shame you, silence that punishes trying to make you feel selfish. But all of this reveals a truth. They valued what you did for them, not who you are. Jung would say that you were not in a relationship with them. You were in a role. And the moment you step out of that role, they don't know who you are anymore. 2. The insecure ones. Confused reaction. These are people who aren't trying to use you. They're just afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of doing something wrong. Afraid of conflict. When you withdraw, they get anxious, not angry. They wonder, did I do something wrong? Are they mad at me? Did I miss something? Should I check on them or give them space? These people aren't entitled. They're insecure. They never learned how to trust emotional distance. To them, distance equals danger. They may overcompensate, reaching out too much, apologizing without knowing why, or trying to fix things that aren't broken. But beneath all that is something genuine. They value you deeply. They just fear abandonment. 3. The respectful ones. Positive reaction. These are rare. These are the people who understand boundaries. They understand that you are not a machine, not a resource, not a bottomless well. When you withdraw, they respond with, "Take your time. I'm here when you need me. I hope you're resting. No pressure, just checking in." They don't demand. They don't guilt you. They don't panic. They simply make space for you. These people are mature, emotionally intelligent, grounded. And Jung would say that they recognize your individuality, yourself, not a projection of their needs. 4. The silent observers. Neutral reaction. These people won't say anything, not out of anger or fear, but because they understand something subtle. Not every distance is rejection. Sometimes it's growth. They respect your autonomy. They trust your process. They don't take your withdrawal personally. And when you return, the relationship continues naturally. These are stable people, the healthiest type. Section 2. Why people react the way they do. Here's where psychology and Jung intersect. Human beings form invisible agreements with each other, social contracts, based on patterns. If you've always been the helper, people unconsciously expect you to help. If you've always been the listener, people expect you to listen. If you've always said yes, they expect yes. Your withdrawal breaks the contract. This is not evil, it's systemic. Your new behavior forces people to restructure their expectations. Some people resist this restructuring. Some accept it. Some embrace it. And their reactions teach you who they really were, behind the convenience, the roles, the expectations. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Your withdrawal forces others to face their own, their dependency, their expectations, their entitlement, their insecurity, their assumptions, their projections. This is why the backlash can be so extreme. It's never just about your distance. It's about the reflection your distance forces them to see. Section 3. How withdrawal exposes hidden truths. Truth. Number 1. Some relationships were one-sided. Your absence reveals who was only there for what you offered. Truth. Number 2. You were carrying emotional weight that wasn't yours. When you stop carrying it, others feel the weight they dumped on you. Truth number 3. You were overextending far more than you realized. People become shocked by the vacuum your absence creates. Truth number 4. Some people liked you more as a role than as a person. Your withdrawal breaks the illusion, and they don't like that. Truth number 5. Your presence was too accessible to be appreciated. Scarcity exposes value. Section 4. People change when you change. Here's the paradox. When you stop being available, people start treating you the way you should have been treated all along. Suddenly, they choose their words more carefully. They approach you with more respect. They stop making assumptions. They become more patient. They ask instead of demand. They value your time. They notice your silence. They feel your absence. Why? Because your availability is no longer free. You're no longer a grocery store open 24/7. You are a selective, rare, intentional presence. This is one of the biggest psychological shifts a person can undergo. When you become less accessible, you become more valuable. But here's the deeper layer, the hidden transformation. You start treating yourself differently too. Your energy returns. Your clarity sharpens. Your nervous system relaxes. Your identity stabilizes. Your self-respect grows. Your boundaries strengthen. And slowly, you stop needing validation from others because you've finally validated yourself. Section 5. Real-life example. The strong friend who disappears. Let's enter a cinematic case study to bring this psychology to life. In every friend group, there is one person who listens more than they speak, who supports more than they are supported, who comforts others while silently grieving themselves. They are the strong friend. But what happens when the strong friend finally pulls back? We can picture it. The messages start. Hey, you good? Where you been? You okay? Then a shift. You don't talk to us anymore. You've changed. You act distant now. and eventually, silence. Why? Because when the strong friend stops carrying the emotional weight of the group collapses under its own imbalance. This isn't cruelty, it's structural. The friend group depended on a role, not a person. And when the role disappears, the dynamic falls apart. This is the power of withdrawal. It exposes the truth. When you are no longer available, the system you held together is forced to reorganize. Some groups grow, some break, some evolve, some disappear. But in every case, you are finally free. You stop being the emotional scaffolding for people who never offered support in return. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Pulling Back. How your energy returns. Withdrawal isn't just an emotional decision. It is a psychological metamorphosis. When you stop being available, your energy doesn't just stay still. It returns to you. In Jungian terms, this is the reabsorption of psychic projection. In modern psychology, it is nervous system recalibration. In spiritual terms, it is the return to self. Let's break this down. Section 1. You stop absorbing other people's emotions. Being overavailable means you're constantly plugged in to other people's emotional states. You absorb their stress, their worries, their trauma, their needs, their chaos, their guilt, their tasks, their emotional storms, and you carry them, even when they never asked you to. But when you withdraw, your emotional field clears. Suddenly, you feel lighter. You feel calmer. You feel more grounded. You stop overthinking. You stop emotionally burning out. Your nervous system finally gets a break. You stop being a sponge. You start being a self. Section 2. You finally hear your own thoughts. Most people don't realize how loud the world is until they stop interacting with it. The endless texts, notifications, requests, conversations, obligations, emotional exchanges. When you stop being available, a strange thing happens. Silence becomes loud. At first, it can feel uncomfortable, foreign, maybe even wrong. But then something miraculous happens. Your inner voice gets louder. You begin hearing what you actually want, what you actually feel, what you actually think, what you actually value, who you actually are. Your identity begins to reassemble itself. Section 3. Your creativity returns. Creative energy cannot survive in constant availability. When you are always responding, you cannot create. When you are always absorbing, you cannot express. When you are always giving, you cannot build. Withdrawal gives you inspiration's reflection, inner spaciousness, mental clarity, boredom, which leads to creativity. Emotional availability for yourself. Jung believed that creativity comes from the unconscious, and the unconscious cannot speak in noise. It speaks in silence. Section 4. Your intuition becomes sharper. Intuition is the ability to sense the truth without conscious reasoning. But intuition cannot function when you're constantly distracted. When you stop being available, you start sensing who is good for you. You start noticing who drains you. You start recognizing emotional patterns. You start trusting your instincts. You start feeling your boundaries naturally. You start predicting outcomes before they happen. This is not magic. This is cognitive bandwidth returning to you. Your mind has space again. Section 5. Your self-worth rises naturally. The biggest transformation is this. You begin valuing your own time. When you stop being overly available, you see how much you were giving. You realize how little some gave back. You understand your energy is precious. You recognize your self-neglect. You feel the weight you carried. You understand you deserve reciprocity. You discover peace you never had before. And suddenly, Effortlessly, your self-esteem rises. Not from affirmations, not from external validation, not from approval, but from alignment. Self-worth grows when your behavior matches your inner truth. When you stop betraying yourself, you stop doubting yourself. Chapter 5. How people start seeing you differently. When you withdraw, people notice your absence, but when you return, they notice your presence. There is a quiet power that emerges from someone who has reclaimed their energy. A power that does not raise its voice. A power that does not chase validation. A power that does not need to defend itself. A power that simply is. Something about you becomes different. Not louder, not angrier, not harder, but clearer. Your presence shifts from scattered to intentional. Your energy shifts from leaking to contained. Your boundaries shift from invisible to undeniable. And the people around you respond, instinctively, unconsciously, inevitably. This chapter is about the psychological shift in how the world perceives you once you stop being over-available. It is deeper than respect, more intimate than confidence, more profound than assertiveness. It is the shift from being a resource to being a person. Section 1. Presence becomes a signal, not a default. When you were always available, your presence meant little. It was predictable, expected, routine. But now, your presence is intentional. When you pull back from the world, something interesting happens. Your presence becomes a signal, not a habit. People stop assuming access to you. They stop assuming you'll always answer. They stop assuming your time is disposable. They stop assuming your energy is free. Because now, when you show up, you're not showing up out of guilt, not out of obligation, not out of fear, not out of reflex. You show up because you choose to. This choice radiates subtly through your posture, your voice, your silence, your gaze. People can sense when someone is no longer performing a role. They can sense when someone has taken themselves seriously. Presence becomes power when it is no longer given away freely. Section 2. Your silence becomes a language. When you were overly available, you filled silence quickly. You explained yourself. You apologized unnecessarily. You reassured others even when no reassurance was needed. You rushed to prevent discomfort. You tried to fix the mood. You tried to keep the peace. But now, you pause. You breathe. You sit with things. You let silence unfold. And people listen. Your silence becomes a boundary, a mirror, a filter, a form of presence, a form of communication Jung once wrote. Solitude is not withdrawal. It is returning to oneself. Your silence is now an expression of yourself, not a void to be filled, not an apology to be fixed, not an emptiness to be feared. In this silence, people see something they didn't see before. You no longer over-explain. You no longer sell yourself. You no longer justify your existence. This forces them to meet you differently, on equal ground, not from entitlement. Section 3. Your words carry more weight. When someone speaks all the time, their words lose value. When someone always says yes, people stop hearing the yes. When someone always agrees, their agreement feels empty. But when you pull back, something changes. Your words carry weight. Not because you shout, not because you demand attention, not because you force anyone to listen, but because the energy that was once scattered is now focused. Your attention is selective. Your engagement is thoughtful. Your conversations are intentional. When you speak now, people pay attention because you don't speak to impress you, don't speak to please you, don't speak to fill silence. You don't speak from fear. You don't speak without purpose. Your words are no longer reflexive. They are expressive, and people feel that difference. Section 4. You stop being a safe target for disrespect. When you were overly available, people assumed you were tolerant. They assumed you would forget. They assumed you would forgive too quickly. They assumed you would always give the benefit of the doubt. They assumed you wouldn't call things out. They assumed you had infinite patience. But now, your energy speaks before you do. You're still kind, but your kindness no longer invites disrespect. You're still patient, but your patience is no longer endless. You're still generous, but your generosity has a boundary. Psychologically, this shift is profound. You stop being an easy person to take advantage of, not through confrontation, but through self-possession. Jung believed that when a person integrates their shadow, they stop being harmless and start being whole. You're no longer harmless. You're grounded, centered, clear. This clarity removes the invisible sign you once carried that said, "I will tolerate anything." Now, your presence says, "I will treat you well, but only if you treat me well." This changes everything. Section 5. People seek your opinion more intentionally. A strange thing happens when you stop being constantly available. People come to you more, not less. Because now your presence is meaningful. Your insight is valued. Your time is treasured. People approach you because they trust your inner stability. They sense your authenticity. They recognize your clarity. They feel your boundaries. They know your perspective is unclouded. They know you won't sugarcoat the truth. They sense you're not trying to impress them. You become someone whose voice matters because you no longer throw your voice into every situation. You speak less, but you mean more. Section 6. You become less liked, but more respected. This is the paradox. When you were always available, people liked you, but they didn't respect you. Now, you are less universally liked, but more deeply respected. People may interpret your distance as maturity, self-respect, emotional stability, higher standards, inner growth boundaries. But beneath all interpretations lies one truth. People treat you differently because you treat yourself differently. Respect begins internally. People mirror your self-conduct long before they mirror your words. Your withdrawal has rewired how the world perceives you. And this shift leads to the most important transformation of all. You start seeing yourself differently. Chapter 6. The return of self-respect. Self-respect isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, like dawn creeping across a dark horizon. When you stop being overly available, you create space. And into that space flows something you've been missing for years: yourself. Let's explore how withdrawal becomes the birthplace of self-respect. Section 1. You stop abandoning yourself to avoid abandonment. This is the deepest wound behind over-availability. You abandoned yourself so others wouldn't abandon you. You said yes when you wanted no, to avoid conflict. You accepted disrespect, to avoid being alone. You gave more than you had, to avoid feeling unneeded. You stayed silent when hurt, to avoid seeming dramatic. You carried burdens, to avoid seeming selfish. But self-abandonment is the most brutal form of betrayal, because unlike others, you cannot escape yourself. When you withdraw, you stop running from yourself. You let your needs come home. You let your boundaries be heard. You let your emotions speak. You let your truth breathe. This is the beginning of self-respect. Section 2. You begin feeling your own value again. When you were always available, you undervalued yourself. You treated your time as if it cost nothing. You treated your energy as infinite. You treated your boundaries as optional. But withdrawal shines a light on something profound. Your time is precious because your life is finite. When you stop scattering your energy everywhere, you feel more grounded, you feel more intentional, you feel more in control, you feel more worthy. You see yourself as someone with value, not because others say so, but because you no longer deny it. Self-worth returns when you stop trading your inner peace for external approval. Section 3. You stop chasing people who don't value you. When you were over-available, you chased emotional crumbs. You pursued people who gave the bare minimum. You tolerated inconsistency. You justified poor treatment. You begged for reciprocity. But when you withdraw, something shifts. You lose interest in people who cannot meet you. Not out of bitterness, not out of anger, not out of cynicism, but because your inner standards have risen. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You no longer plead. You no longer explain why you deserve respect. You simply move where you are valued. This is one of the strongest signs of self-respect. You stop trying to be chosen and start choosing. Section 4. You feel safe in your own company. Many people cannot withdraw because they fear themselves. The quiet terrifies them. The solitude exposes them. The silence reveals them. Their inner world feels unfamiliar. But when you withdraw long enough, something beautiful happens. You feel safe alone. Not lonely. Safe. You enjoy your thoughts, your space, your routines, your hobbies, your solitude. You become your own safe place. This inner safety is the foundation of self-respect. Because when you feel safe with yourself, you no longer cling to unsafe people. Section 5. Your boundaries stop being spoken and start being felt. Boundaries are powerful, but the most powerful boundaries are not verbal. They are energetic. People feel them. When you withdraw and rebuild internally, your no becomes firmer. Your yes becomes intentional. Your limits become clear. Your energy becomes focused. Your standards rise. Your interactions become selective. You don't need to defend your boundaries. You embody them. Jung believed that wholeness is achieved by integrating the rejected parts of the self. Your boundaries were the part you rejected. Now they are the part you protect. Section 6. You finally recognize who you were meant to be. When you stop being available to everyone, you become available to your destiny. Your creativity returns. Your intuition sharpens. Your dreams reawaken. Your purpose becomes clearer. A life lived in constant availability is not a life lived intentionally. Withdrawal reconnects you to your goals, your identity, your vision, your true desires, your inner compass. You see yourself not as a resource, but as a person with depth, purpose, value, and potential. This is the essence of self-respect. You become the main character in your own life again. Chapter 7. The world you create. When you choose yourself, there is a world inside you. A world that waits patiently behind the noise, behind the obligations, behind the masks, behind the roles you were forced to play. Most people never reach it, not because it's hidden, not because it's hard to find, but because they never stop moving long enough to hear its call. When you were endlessly available, this inner world was drowned out by other people's needs, other people's emergencies, other people's expectations, other people's chaos, other people's noise. But when you stop being overly available, when you withdraw, when you reclaim your energy, you open the door to this inner world. And what you find there is not emptiness, not loneliness, not abandonment. What you find is yourself. Section 1. You create a life built on intention, not obligation. Most people live reactively. They respond to messages. They respond to pressure. They respond to demands. They respond to expectations. They respond to everything except their own soul. Withdrawal changes this. You stop responding. You start choosing. Instead of, "What do people need from me?" you ask, "What do I need from me?" Instead of, "How can I avoid disappointing others?" you ask, "How can I stop disappointing myself?" Instead of, "How do I keep everyone happy?" you ask, "How do I live honestly?" Intentional living begins when reactive living ends, and it ends the moment you stop being available for every demand that comes your way. Section 2. You attract healthier relationships and systems. When you overgive, you attract takers-users, the emotionally lazy, the dependent, the insecure, the manipulative, because your past behavior told them you would absorb the weight they refused to carry. Your light became their lamp. Your energy became their charger. Your time became their resource. Your kindness became their cushion. Withdrawal flips this dynamic. When you stop being available, takers leave. Manipulators lose interest. Insecure people stabilize or drift. Avoidant people become uncomfortable. Unavailable people fall away. Disrespectful people disappear. And what remains is the truth. But this clearing creates space. Space for people who are healthier, grounded, reciprocal, emotionally mature. People who communicate openly, value boundaries, offer support, seek mutuality, show appreciation, bring emotional safety. Choosing yourself clears the emotional debris of your life, and healthy souls can only enter a cleared space. Section 3. Your purpose finally has room to grow. Purpose is not found in burnout. It is not found in constant noise. It is not found in being everything to everyone. Purpose grows in silence, in solitude, in alignment, in inner spaciousness, in truth. When you were over-available, your purpose suffocated. It drowned under responsibilities that weren't yours. It dimmed under the weight of obligations that drained your energy. It retreated into the background because you were too busy being available for someone else's story. But once you withdraw, something awakens. You begin to hear the dreams you buried, the desires you silenced, the goals you postponed, the talents you forgot, the ideas you ignored, the visions you lost. Carl Jung believed that the soul will not stop sending signals until a person becomes who they are meant to be. Your exhaustion was a signal. Your resentment was a signal. Your burnout was a signal. Your withdrawal was a signal. All pointing to one truth. Your purpose has been waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself. Section 4. You feel a peace you have never felt before. Peace is not the absence of people. Peace is the absence of self-betrayal. When you stop being available for everything and everyone, your nervous system heals your thoughts. Slow down, your breathing deepens, your anxiety fades. Your body softens, your spirit steadies. You discover a peace that feels ancient. A peace that feels like it belongs to you. A peace that doesn't depend on anyone else. This peace is not calmness. It is alignment. The peace of listening to your body, honoring your needs, recognizing your limits, trusting your intuition, following your inner truth, allowing others to handle their responsibilities. Peace begins where self-neglect ends. Section 5. You become a different person internally. Your withdrawal changes your relationships externally, but internally it changes something far deeper: your identity. You stop being the caretaker. You stop being the emotional dumpster. You stop being the available one. You stop being the rescuer. You stop being the fixer. You stop being the strong friend. You stop being the peacemaker. You stop being the reliable one. You stop being the martyr. You become someone else entirely. You become grounded discerning, confident calm, present intentional selective centered whole. You don't just gain self-respect, you become self-respect. And people see it, they feel it, they respond to it. This is the final evolution withdrawal gives you, a new identity, not built on availability, but on authenticity. Section 6. You realize you were never meant to be constantly available. This realization strikes quietly, but powerfully. You were not created to be accessible to everyone. Your time is finite. Your energy is finite. Your emotional bandwidth is finite. Your life is finite. But you didn't live that way. You lived as if you were infinite, as if you had no limits, as if you could give endlessly without losing yourself. You weren't wrong. You were untrained. You were trained to serve, but not to protect, to give, but not to receive, to help, but not to rest, to be available, but not to be whole. Withdrawal teaches you what childhood didn't. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to preserve yourself. You're allowed to prioritize yourself. Choosing yourself is not selfish. It is the beginning of sanity. Final chapter. The power of scarcity. In psychology, scarcity changes perception. In economics, scarcity increases value. In relationships, scarcity sharpens awareness. In spirituality, scarcity deepens presence. Scarcity is not manipulation. Scarcity is nature. Diamonds are rare, so they are valued. Golden hours are brief, so they are cherished. Seasons change quickly, so they are noticed. And your energy, once scattered, diluted, wasted, is becoming scarce. Not because you withdraw out of fear, not because you retreat from the world, not because you are cold, but because you have finally remembered something essential. Your energy is sacred. Your attention is meaningful. Your presence is powerful. Your boundaries are valid. Your needs matter. Your time is limited. Your soul is irreplaceable. Scarcity is the natural state of anything valuable. You were not meant to be infinite. You were meant to be meaningful. And you cannot be meaningful when you are endlessly available. Section 1. When your presence becomes scarce, your value becomes visible before you withdrew. People assumed you'd always be there. Now, they notice your silence. They feel your absence. They appreciate your presence. They reflect before reaching out. They choose their words carefully. They value their time with you. They recognize your boundaries. They meet you with respect. You didn't become more valuable. You simply stopped giving your value away for free. This is why withdrawal transforms relationships so dramatically. People cannot value what they do not fear losing. Your availability numbed them. Your withdrawal awakens them. Section 2. Scarcity reveals the truth about others. When you stop being endlessly available, the users leave, the takers withdraw, the lazy stop, trying the insecure panic. The entitled react, the manipulators fail, the unstable collapse, the unavailable disappear. What remains are the genuine, the grounded, the reciprocal, the stable, the emotionally mature, the intentional, the respectful, the supportive, the real. Your scarcity filters your world, not through force, through truth. Section 3. Scarcity creates personal mystery. People used to know everything you felt, everything you thought, everything you were doing, everything you would say yes to. Now, they don't. And this not knowing creates something powerful. Mystery. Not in the manipulative sense, not in the evasive sense, but in the psychological sense. Mystery is created when someone is intentional, someone is self-contained, someone is selective, Someone doesn't overshare. Someone moves with clarity. Someone is not emotionally reactive. Someone doesn't seek approval. Someone holds themselves with dignity. Your scarcity reveals that you are no longer needy, and people are drawn to those who do not need them. This isn't arrogance. This is emotional self-sufficiency. Section 4. Scarcity is the root of inner power. Jung believed that inner power is not dominance, control, or superiority. Inner power is self-knowledge, self-control, self-trust, self-honoring, self-respect. These qualities cannot grow when you're constantly available. They grow in solitude, silence, reflection, boundaries, introspection, conscious withdrawal. When you withdraw from being overly accessible, you withdraw into yourself. The deeper you go inward, the stronger you emerge outward. Your presence becomes more powerful because it is more aligned. This is the paradox. Scarcity gives birth to presence. Presence gives birth to power. Power gives birth to respect. And it all began the day you whispered, "I can't keep doing this." Section 5. You are no longer afraid of losing people. When you were overly available, you feared losing people. You feared disappointing them. You feared being abandoned. You feared being replaced. You feared being forgotten. But something changes when you stop abandoning yourself. You no longer fear being abandoned by others. This is the final liberation. People leaving your life no longer terrifies you, because your peace does not depend on them. Your worth is not tied to them. Your identity is not built on them. Your value is not defined by them. You stop chasing. You stop holding on. You stop negotiating for dignity. You stop explaining yourself. You stop convincing people of your worth. You simply let go. And in the letting go, you rise. Final sequence. The person you become when you stop being available. There is a version of you waiting on the other side of withdrawal. A version of you who is stronger, clearer, calmer, wiser, more centered, more grounded, more intentional, more respected, more authentic, more powerful, more present, more whole. This version of you does not tolerate disrespect. This version of you does not explain boundaries. This version of you does not beg for reciprocity. This version of you does not chase love. This version of you does not carry emotional weight that isn't yours. This version of you does not live from fear. This version of you does not dilute their presence. This version of you does not betray their own needs. This version of you lives with dignity. And all of this transformation came from one quiet, simple, revolutionary act. You stopped being overly available. You chose yourself. And everything changed.